My name is Damian Wilson, and at 67 years old, I thought I had seen it all. That evening I was buttoning my favorite blue dress shirt, excited to finally see my son after weeks of canceled plans. The clock read 6:15, giving me plenty of time to drive across town. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Frank, my lawyer. "Just call me, immediately." With trembling fingers, I dialed his number. What he told me about my new daughter-in-law knocked the air from my lungs. I had to make a decision right then that would change everything. Before I continue this story, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button too. Trust me, you will want to hear how this ends. Paul was my only son, my pride and joy. After Margaret, my wife of 38 years, passed away from breast cancer 5 years ago, he became my whole world. I had built a successful software company in Seattle during the 90s, starting from nothing more than an idea and a small loan. By the time I sold it 8 years ago, we had over 300 employees and offices in 4 states. The sale had left me comfortable for retirement, with investments and savings that would last well beyond my lifetime. Paul took after me in many ways, smart as a whip with numbers, but with better social skills than I ever had. He went to Stanford, got his engineering degree, and landed a job at one of those big tech companies everyone knows. At 35, he had a promising career ahead of him, though he worked too many hours in my opinion. I always told him life was about more than just career success, but parents rarely get listened to on such matters. I still remember the day Paul called to tell me he had met someone special. His voice had that light, airy quality I hadn't heard since he was a teenager talking about his first crush. Her name was Alicia Thompson, 32, and she worked in finance. They had met at a conference in Portland where Paul was speaking about some technical thing I couldn't pretend to understand. "Dad, she gets me," Paul had said. A simple statement that carried immense weight. After a string of relationships that fizzled out, usually due to his work schedule, I was hopeful this one might be different. 3 weeks later, I met her at a dinner Paul arranged at his favorite steakhouse downtown. Alicia was everything Paul described and more. About 5'6", with dark brown hair cut in an elegant bob and green eyes that sparkled when she talked. She was articulate, laughing at all the right moments, and asking me thoughtful questions about my life and business. "I work for Meridian Financial in Chicago," she explained over dessert, "but I just transferred to the Seattle office." The timing was perfect, really. Meeting Paul right as I was relocating feels like fate. She placed her hand over Paul's then, and the way he looked at her told me everything I needed to know. My son was head over heels. Over the following months I saw them regularly. Alicia seemed perfect. She was attentive to Paul, intelligent in conversation, and even took an interest in my gardening hobby, something Paul had always good-naturedly tolerated at best. She asked about Margaret too, listening to my stories with what seemed like genuine interest, her eyes misting at the sadder parts. "Your wife sounds like she was an amazing woman," Alicia had said. "I wish I could have met her." The proposal came just 4 months after they started dating. Paul called me, voice breathless with excitement, to tell me he had popped the question at Sunset Cliffs, Margaret's favorite spot in the city. She said, "Yes, Dad." Can you believe it? She actually said yes. Of course she said yes, I thought. My son was a catch by any standard, handsome, successful, kind-hearted. But I kept that to myself and simply congratulated him, genuinely happy to hear such joy in his voice. The wedding planning moved with a speed that surprised me. When I gently suggested they might want to wait a bit longer, both assured me they knew what they wanted. "When you know," Paul had said, an arm around Alicia's waist. "Life is too short to wait when you find the right person," Alicia added, leaning into him. I couldn't argue with that sentiment, especially since Margaret and I had gotten engaged after only 6 months of dating. Who was I to question love's timeline? I offered to help with the wedding costs, and they gratefully accepted. The final bill came to just over $80,000. Nothing outrageous by today's standards, but certainly not cheap. I also gave them a check for $50,000 as a wedding present, intended to help with a down payment on a house, though I placed no restrictions on its use. The wedding itself was beautiful, held at Lakeside Gardens with about 100 guests. I noticed something odd, though. While our side of the church was full of family and friends, the bride's side was sparse. When I asked Alicia about it, her smile dimmed slightly. "I grew up in foster care," she explained, and I lost touch with most of my foster families over the years. My work friends are scattered across the country, and many couldn't make it on short notice. My heart went out to her. No parents or siblings to share her special day. It made me even more determined to welcome her properly into our family. After the honeymoon, a 2-week trip to Italy I had helped arrange as a surprise, things began to change subtly. Paul called less frequently. Our weekly dinners became bi-weekly, then monthly. When I suggested getting together, there was always some reason they couldn't make it. Work commitments, house hunting, Alicia not feeling well. It had been nearly 2 months since the wedding, and tonight would be the first time I would be visiting their home, a rental they had taken while looking for a place to buy. I was excited to finally reconnect with my son, to see how married life was treating him. Perhaps I had been overthinking things. Newlyweds needed their space, after all. As I finished getting ready, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Little moments from the past months flickered through my mind, moments I had dismissed at the time. But collectively, they were starting to form a pattern I couldn't ignore. Looking back now, the warning signs about Alicia were there from the beginning. I just didn't want to see them. It started with small things, questions about my finances that seemed a bit too specific. During one of our early dinners together, while Paul was in the restroom, Alicia had leaned forward with an interested expression. "Paul mentioned you sold your company." "That must have been quite lucrative," she said, swirling her wine glass. "Do you manage your investments yourself, or work with an advisor?" At the time, I thought she was just making conversation, showing interest in my life. I told her about my financial advisor, Jackson, who had been handling my portfolio for years. "Have you considered diversifying more?" she asked. "I see a lot of portfolios in my work, and sometimes these old-school advisors miss opportunities in emerging markets." When Paul returned, the conversation shifted seamlessly to vacation spots in Europe. I thought nothing more of it until similar questions came up at subsequent meetings. How was my retirement fund allocated? Did I own my house outright, or have a mortgage? Had I updated my will recently? Each time, the questions came when Paul was momentarily absent or distracted. Then there were the inconsistencies in her stories. During one dinner, Alicia mentioned growing up in Boston. A month later, she referred to her high school years in Philadelphia. When I casually mentioned the discrepancy, she laughed it off. "Oh, we moved around so much with different foster families. Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, they all blur together sometimes." It seemed reasonable enough, and I felt bad for even bringing it up. Who was I to question the difficult childhood she had endured? The wedding guest situation bothered me more in retrospect. Not a single person from her past. No childhood friends. No former foster parents who had made an impact. No colleagues from her previous positions in Chicago. She explained that she preferred to look forward, not backward, and that meeting Paul had given her a fresh start. "I've always been something of a loner," she admitted with a vulnerability that seemed genuine. "Moving frequently as a child makes it hard to form lasting bonds." After the wedding, I ran into more peculiarities. At the grocery store one afternoon, I bumped into a woman named Tanya, who introduced herself as working at Meridian Financial. Excited, I mentioned that my new daughter-in-law worked there too. "Alicia Thompson? About 5'6", brown hair, green eyes," I described. Tanya looked confused. "I've been with Meridian for 6 years and know everyone in the Seattle office. We're not that big. I don't think we have an Alicia. She transferred from Chicago recently," I added. "That's strange. We haven't had any transfers from Chicago in over a year. Are you sure it's Meridian and not Meridian Trust? They're completely different companies." I brushed it off as confusion on my part, though I was certain Alicia had specifically mentioned Meridian Financial. When I casually brought this up to Paul on the phone, he seemed flustered. "Oh, Dad, you must have misunderstood. Alicia works for a subsidiary that operates under a different name. It's complicated corporate structure stuff." His explanation didn't sit right with me, but I didn't press the issue. Why would I doubt my own son? The most concerning development came about 3 months into their relationship, well before the wedding. Alicia began suggesting that she could help me with my investments. "Jackson is very traditional," she said during a lunch when Paul had stepped away to take a work call. "With my connections, I could easily get you into some exclusive funds that would double your returns." When I politely declined, saying I was happy with my conservative approach at my age, she nodded understandingly. but the subject kept coming up in different forms. After they were engaged, she asked if I had considered selling my home. "Property values in your neighborhood have peaked," she said with authority. "And that big house for just one person? You could downsize, invest the difference, and have even more for your retirement and legacy." My home was where Margaret and I had raised Paul, where we had built our life together. The garden out back contained her favorite roses that I still tended. The thought of selling it made my chest tighten. Again, I declined, and again Alicia took it gracefully. But I noticed Paul watching these exchanges with an odd expression, something between embarrassment and anxiety. After they returned from their honeymoon, Paul changed. Our phone conversations grew shorter, more formal. He seemed distracted, often saying he needed to go because Alicia needed him for something. When we did meet for a quick lunch, he checked his phone constantly, as if afraid to miss a call or text from her. "Everything okay, son?" I asked during one such lunch, about 3 weeks after the wedding. "Yeah, of course," he said too quickly. "Just busy. The transition to married life, you know. And work is crazy right now." But his eyes didn't meet mine, and the dark circles under them told a different story. My son was stressed, possibly unhappy, but putting on a brave face. I tried to respect their privacy. The first year of marriage has adjustments, after all. But when Paul missed our standing father-son birthday lunch for the first time in his adult life, claiming a last-minute work emergency, my concern deepened. I called his office on a hunch, and his assistant told me he had taken the day off. That evening, I called my oldest friend Lloyd Peterson for advice. Lloyd and I had gone to college together, and he had spent 30 years in law enforcement before retiring. He had been my rock after Margaret passed, coming over with beer and pizza on the hardest days, just sitting with me in silence when words weren't enough. "Something's not right with this, Alicia," I told him after explaining the situation. "I can't put my finger on it, but my gut is screaming." Lloyd took a long swig of his beer, his weathered face thoughtful. "Never ignore your gut, Damian. In all my years on the force, the biggest mistakes happened when people ignored their instincts. But what if I'm just being paranoid? An overprotective father who can't let go? Then you'll owe the girl an apology someday. But if you're right, well, better to be sure, especially with what's at stake." "What do you suggest?" Lloyd set down his beer. "Let me make a call. I know someone who can look into her background discreetly. Professional, legal, but thorough." That conversation was the first step down a path I never expected to travel. A path that would ultimately lead to that fateful text from my lawyer on what should have been a simple evening visiting my son and daughter-in-law for dinner. Lloyd called me the next morning. "I've got someone you should meet. Frank Walker. He's not just any lawyer. He specializes in elder financial abuse and fraud cases." "Elder abuse?" I repeated, slightly offended. "I'm only 67, Lloyd, hardly helpless." Lloyd chuckled. "This isn't about your capabilities, Damian. It's about the law and how these cases are categorized. Trust me, Frank is the best person for what we're dealing with here." 2 days later, I sat across from Frank Walker in his downtown office. Frank was around 50, with salt and pepper hair and rectangular glasses that gave him an intellectual appearance. His office walls were lined with legal texts and framed credentials. "Lloyd gave me a brief overview," Frank said after we exchanged pleasantries. "But I'd like to hear everything from you, from the beginning." For the next hour, I detailed my concerns about Alicia. The inconsistencies in her background, her unusual interest in my finances, the changes in Paul's behavior. When I finished, Frank leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Unfortunately, what you're describing fits a pattern I've seen before," he said gravely. "I'm not saying your daughter-in-law is definitely running a scam, but there are concerning parallels." "What kind of scam?" I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. "There are people who target individuals with assets, particularly older individuals. They create false identities, manufacture background stories, and use emotional manipulation to gain access to finances. Sometimes they work alone, sometimes in networks." My head was spinning, but she married my son. They lived together. Surely that level of commitment goes beyond a simple con. Frank's expression grew more serious. "Marriage is actually a common tactic in the more sophisticated schemes. It creates legal access to assets, establishes trust, and makes it harder for family members to intervene without appearing jealous or controlling." What should I do? I asked, feeling slightly ill. Let me investigate, Frank said, opening a notebook. I'll need as much information as you can provide. Full name, date of birth if you know it, previous addresses, employment history, anything you have. I provided what little I knew about Alicia, which, I realized with growing unease, wasn't much despite her being part of our family now. I'll need some time, Frank warned. These investigations require discretion. We don't want to tip her off if there is something untoward happening. And if there isn't? I asked. If she's legitimate? Then no harm done. She'll never know we looked, and you'll have peace of mind. I left Frank's office feeling both relieved to have taken action and guilty for suspecting my son's wife. Was I overreacting? Seeing problems where none existed? I tried to push away these thoughts as I drove home, reminding myself that verification wasn't the same as accusation. Over the next week, I made efforts to connect with Paul one-on-one. I suggested lunch near his office, a basketball game, anything that might give us time alone. He agreed to lunch, though he seemed reluctant. We met at a quiet sandwich shop near his workplace. Paul looked tired, the kind of exhaustion that goes beyond physical fatigue. His clothes, usually impeccably maintained, appeared slightly rumpled. "How's married life treating you?" I asked after we ordered. "Great, Dad. Really great." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Alicia is amazing." I treaded carefully. "Anything new with work? That project you were excited about last month?" Paul visibly relaxed at the change of subject, launching into details about his latest assignment. It was the most animated I'd seen him in months. But when his phone buzzed with a text, he immediately checked it, his expression shifting to something like anxiety. "Alicia," he explained, typing a quick response. "She needs to know when I'll be home." "Everything okay between you two?" I ventured. His eyes snapped up. "Why wouldn't it be? We're newlyweds, Dad. You just seem stressed lately." Paul sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Work is demanding right now, and adjusting to marriage, combining finances, all that. It's a transition. I decided to take a risk." "Speaking of finances, how's that going? Merging accounts and all?" A flicker of something crossed his face. "Discomfort? Fear? Fine. Alicia has a background in finance, so she's taking the lead on that. Makes sense, right?" "Sure. As long as you're both comfortable with the arrangement." Paul was silent for a moment. Then, in a lower voice, "Alicia thinks it's best if she handles the day-to-day stuff. She's changed some passwords temporarily while she organizes everything." Warning bells rang in my head. "Passwords to your accounts? Just while she sets up our system," Paul said defensively. "She's really good with money management. And you're okay with not having access to your own accounts?" I kept my tone neutral, conversational. Paul shifted uncomfortably. "It's temporary. And she's my wife, Dad. I trust her." I backed off, sensing his growing discomfort. We finished lunch with safer topics, but as we parted, Paul hesitated by his car. "Dad," he said, voice barely audible, "Alicia might approach you about an investment opportunity, something she's really excited about." "What kind of opportunity?" He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Some kind of real estate development. High returns, limited availability. She really wants you involved." "And what do you think about it?" I asked carefully. "I think," he started, then stopped himself. "Just let me know if she brings it up, okay?" Before I could press further, he was in his car and driving away, leaving me with an even deeper sense of unease. 2 more weeks passed without word from Frank. I called Lloyd several times, growing increasingly anxious. "These things take time," Lloyd assured me. "Frank is thorough. That's what you want." Meanwhile, Paul was becoming harder to reach. Calls went to voicemail. Texts received brief, delayed responses. I drove by their rental home once, on the pretense of being in the neighborhood, but no one answered the door despite both their cars being in the driveway. Then, out of the blue, Alicia called me directly. Her voice was warm, friendly, nothing like the distant interactions of recent weeks. "Damian, it's been too long. Paul and I were just saying we need to have you over for dinner. Are you free this Friday?" Surprised by the sudden invitation, I agreed. "Wonderful. Paul is really looking forward to it. And I have something exciting to discuss with you. A really unique opportunity I think you'll be interested in." There it was. Just as Paul had predicted, I kept my tone casual. "Sounds intriguing. What kind of opportunity?" "Oh, better to discuss in person. It's quite special, and spots are filling quickly. I pulled some strings to get you consideration." Her voice lowered confidentially. "The returns are incredible, Damian. Life-changing." After confirming the time, we ended the call. I immediately phoned Frank's office, but was told he was out of town on a case. I left an urgent message explaining the dinner invitation and the mentioned opportunity. Friday arrived with still no word from Frank. As I prepared to leave for Paul and Alicia's home, I felt mounting anxiety. Something told me this dinner was important, perhaps pivotal. I was buckling my watch when my phone buzzed with a text from Frank. "Just call me, immediately." My heart pounding, I dialed Frank's number. He answered on the first ring. "Damian, where are you right now?" His voice was tense, urgent. "At home. About to leave for dinner at Paul's." "What's going on, Frank?" "Stay where you are for a minute. I just got back into town and received some crucial information. I've been working with a colleague in Chicago who specializes in identity fraud." I sank onto the edge of my bed. "Tell me." "Alicia Thompson doesn't exist," Frank said bluntly. "At least, not the Alicia Thompson who married your son. The woman living with Paul is actually named Stephanie Morgan. She's wanted for questioning in 3 states in connection with financial fraud schemes." The room seemed to tilt around me. "What? Are you certain?" "Completely. We have photo confirmation, fingerprint matches from previous arrests, the works. She's been operating under various aliases for at least 8 years. Alicia Thompson is her latest creation, complete with falsified employment records and a manufactured background." I struggled to process this information. But what exactly has she done? What's her game? Frank's sigh was heavy. "She's what we call a professional predator. She targets wealthy individuals, or in this case, the son of a wealthy individual. She's been married 4 times previously, that we can confirm, each time to men with significant assets or inheritance prospects. Each marriage lasted between 6 months and 2 years before she vanished, taking with her as much money as she could legally access or, in some cases, illegally transfer." "My God," I whispered. "And Paul? What about my son?" "Based on what you've told me and the pattern of her previous operations, she's likely isolated him emotionally and taken control of his finances. The urgent invitation to discuss an opportunity suggests she's now moving to the next phase, targeting your assets directly." I thought of Paul's tired eyes, his rumpled appearance, the way he jumped when his phone buzzed. He's not himself lately. Could she be? I don't know, drugging him or something? It's possible, but not necessarily with chemicals. People like Stephanie are expert psychological manipulators. They can create dependency through emotional abuse, gaslighting, and isolation techniques. Your son might feel confused, doubtful of his own perceptions, even afraid. Her last victim, Frank continued, was a successful business owner in his 40s. By the time she left him, she had drained his personal accounts, taken loans against his business using forged documents, and destroyed his credit. He lost his company, his home, everything. He was so ashamed, he didn't even report it until months later, when she was already gone and operating under a new name. My hands were shaking now. "What do I do, Frank? The dinner is in an hour." There was a pause on the line. "The safest approach would be to avoid the dinner entirely. Cancel with some excuse. We need time to compile the evidence properly and consider our legal options. Going there now could tip our hand before we're ready." "And leave Paul alone with her? For how much longer?" The thought was unbearable. "I understand your concern, but confronting her without preparation could make things worse. People like Stephanie can be unpredictable when cornered." "I'm not leaving my son in that house one more night without knowing the truth," I said firmly. "What evidence do you have right now that I could show him?" "I have a preliminary report with photos of her previous identities, court records from 2 states, and statements from her most recent ex-husband. It's not comprehensive yet, but it's compelling. I can email it to you immediately." "Do it," I said. "I'm going to that dinner." "Damian, I strongly advise against this approach. At least wait until Monday when I can go with you. We could bring a law enforcement contact of mine, make sure everything is handled properly. Every hour my son spends with this woman is another hour she has to manipulate him and drain his accounts. I'm going frank." Recognizing my resolve, Frank shifted to damage control. "If you're determined to do this tonight, you need to be strategic. Don't confront her immediately. Observe first. Try to get Paul alone if possible. Show him the evidence privately before any confrontation with her. And for God's sake, don't sign anything or agree to any financial commitments, no matter how she presents them." "I won't," I promised. "I'm sending the file now. Review it before you go. And Damian, be careful. These professional scammers can turn dangerous when exposed." "I'll call you afterward," I said, ending the call as my email notification chimed. The file Frank sent contained more than I expected. Photos of Alicia under different names, with varying hair colors and styles, news clippings about investment scams in Boston and Chicago, court documents detailing fraud charges, a restraining order from an ex-husband. Most damning was a photo of her with a previous husband, a man named Robert Green, at a charity gala. She looked almost identical to the woman who had married my son, save for blonde hair instead of brown. My mind raced back through every interaction with Alicia, seeing each moment in a new, sinister light. Her questions about my finances, her fabricated background, her careful isolation of Paul from family and friends, it was all part of a calculated scheme. I printed the key documents from Frank's file, slipping them into an inner pocket of my jacket. Then I called Lloyd. "It's worse than we thought," I said after explaining Frank's revelations. "I'm going to their house now for dinner." "The hell you are," Lloyd responded. "Not alone, you're not. I need to get Paul away from her. Show him the truth. Then I'm coming with you. Not inside, but nearby. Give me the address, I'll park down the street. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you text me one word, now. I'll call in a favor with some former colleagues on the force. Say we suspect domestic disturbance. They can be there in minutes." I agreed to Lloyd's plan, grateful for the backup. As I prepared to leave, I took one last look at the photos in Frank's file. The woman smiling beside my son in their wedding photo was a phantom, a carefully constructed facade. Beneath her charming smile and intelligent conversation lurked a predator who had destroyed lives across multiple states. And she had her claws in my only child. With renewed determination, I grabbed my keys. It was time to save my son from the terrible truth about his new wife. I drove to Paul and Alicia's rental home, with my heart hammering against my ribs. The modest two-story house sat in a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes from my place. Nothing about its ordinary appearance suggested the drama unfolding within its walls. I parked behind Paul's familiar blue sedan, noting Alicia's white Audi in the garage. Lloyd texted to confirm he was positioned a block away. I replied with a simple "here" before approaching the front door. Before I could knock, the door swung open to reveal Alicia, looking radiant in a burgundy dress, her smile wide and welcoming. "Damian, right on time. Come in, come in." She embraced me warmly, the scent of her expensive perfume momentarily overwhelming. I forced myself to return the hug, to play along. The knowledge of her true identity burned in my mind, but I maintained the facade. "Thanks for having me over. It's been too long." "Entirely our fault," she said, leading me inside. The interior was tastefully decorated, though I noticed few personal touches. No photos of Paul's childhood or our family. Nothing that spoke of history or sentiment. We've been so busy getting settled. "Paul, your dad is here." Paul appeared from the kitchen, and my heart sank at the sight of him. In the month since I'd seen him last, he seemed to have aged years. Thinner, paler, with dark circles under his eyes. He wore a brave smile that didn't reach those eyes. "Hey, Dad," he said, giving me a quick hug. His body felt tense like a coiled spring. "Glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, studying him. Was that fear I detected beneath his forced cheerfulness? "How have you been, son?" "Great, great," he said too quickly. "Work's been crazy, but you know how it is." "Let's not talk about work tonight," Alicia interjected smoothly, taking my coat. I felt momentary panic as she handled the jacket containing Frank's documents, but she merely hung it on a coat rack by the door. "This is family time. I've made my special roasted salmon. Paul raves about it, don't you, honey?" Paul nodded, the motion almost mechanical. "Can I get you a drink, Damian?" Alicia continued. "Wine? Whiskey? I know you prefer Macallan, so we got a bottle, especially for tonight." The detail unsettled me. I had mentioned my whiskey preference once, months ago. That she remembered and used it now seemed calculated rather than thoughtful. "Just water for now, thanks," I said. "Driving, you know." A flicker of something crossed her face. Disappointment? Annoyance? It vanished so quickly I might have imagined it. "Of course. So responsible." She turned to Paul. "Honey, why don't you show your dad around while I check on dinner?" Paul led me through a tour of the downstairs, his movements stiff, conversation stilted. When we reached the small back patio, I gestured for him to step outside, away from Alicia's ears. "Paul," I began quietly once we were alone, "I need to ask you something important. Are you okay? Really okay?" He glanced nervously toward the house. "Why wouldn't I be? Everything's fine, Dad." "You don't look fine. You look exhausted. Stressed." "Just work," he said, the excuse sounding hollow even to his own ears, judging by his grimace. "Is it Alicia? Has she done something?" His eyes widened in alarm. "Keep your voice down, please. She has. She gets upset easily. It's better if we don't, if everything stays calm." The fear in his voice confirmed my worst suspicions. "Son, we need to talk. There's something you should know about Alicia. Something important." "What are you talking about?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Before I could continue, Alicia called from inside. "Dinner's ready, you two. Come in before it gets cold." Paul flinched at the sound of her voice. "We should go in. She doesn't like to be kept waiting." My son, once confident and independent, now jumped at his wife's call like a trained animal. Anger flared in my chest, but I tamped it down. This required delicacy. "We'll talk later," I promised. "Just know I'm here for you, whatever's going on." Dinner was an exercise in restraint. Alicia dominated the conversation, charming and attentive on the surface. She served the meal with flourish, detailing the special ingredients and technique. The food was excellent, I had to admit, though my appetite had vanished with Frank's revelations. "So, Damian," Alicia said as she poured more wine for herself, having already finished 2 glasses. "I mentioned on the phone that I wanted to discuss an opportunity with you." "Yes, you did," I replied neutrally. "What kind of opportunity?" Her eyes gleamed. "An investment that's going to revolutionize retirement living in the Pacific Northwest. Luxury senior communities with full medical care on site, cutting-edge technology, the works. Ground floor investment opportunity, minimum $500,000, but the projected returns are astronomical." "Sounds interesting," I said, watching Paul stare at his plate. "Is this through your company?" A slight hesitation. "A partnership between several firms, including mine. I've already gotten Paul involved. We've committed quite significantly, haven't we, honey?" Paul nodded without looking up. "How significantly?" I asked. "Well, that's private," she laughed lightly. "But let's just say we believe in putting skin in the game. The minimum investment is actually $1 million, but I've convinced the partners to make an exception for you at $500,000, as family." "How generous," I remarked. "And when would this investment be due?" "That's the thing." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "The window closes Monday. It's moving that quickly. But don't worry, I've prepared all the paperwork already. We can take care of everything tonight, and I'll handle all the details." "You seem very prepared," I observed. "I'm always prepared when it comes to helping families secure their financial future." Her smile remained fixed, but I noticed a calculating quality to her gaze. "Shall I get the documents?" "They just need your signature. I'd like to review them first, if you don't mind." "Perhaps after dinner?" She nodded, though her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course. I'll go grab them while you two catch up." The moment she left the dining room, I turned to Paul. "Son, listen to me. We don't have much time. I need to show you something." His eyes darted toward the direction Alicia had gone. "Dad, please, just go along with it. Sign the papers, but tell her you need a day to transfer the funds. Once you're gone, we can figure something out." The desperation in his voice chilled me. "Paul, what's happened? What has she done?" He looked down, shame evident in every line of his body. "She has control of everything. All our accounts, my credit cards. She even took out loans in my name. I didn't realize until it was too late, and now I don't know what's real anymore. She says things, then denies saying them. Makes me think I'm losing my mind." "She's manipulating you," I said urgently. "And she's not who she claims to be." Paul's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" "Her name isn't Alicia Thompson. It's Stephanie Morgan. She's done this before, multiple times. She marries men for their money, drains them dry, and disappears." Disbelief warred with hope in Paul's expression. "How could you possibly know that?" I glanced toward the hallway, then quickly retrieved my phone. "I hired someone to look into her background. I have proof, son. Photos, court records, statements from her previous victims." I pulled up the file Frank had sent, showing Paul a photo of Alicia under another name, with another husband, his face drained of color. This can't be. But it looks exactly like her. Because it is her. She's a con artist, Paul, a professional. She's been convicted of fraud in Illinois and has charges pending in Massachusetts. Oh God, he whispered, the reality crashing down on him. What have I done? What do we do now? First, we need to know exactly what she's taken. How bad is it? Paul's voice shook. Bad. Our joint savings, emptied. About $70,000. She said it went into investments, but I've never seen any documentation. My retirement account, she somehow got access and took a loan against it. And the wedding gift you gave us? Gone. She said she was starting a business account, but now claims I agreed to invest it in something else. I don't even know anymore. The papers she's getting now, what are they exactly? Some investment scheme. She's been pushing me to get you involved for weeks, talking about your retirement savings, how we could help you get better returns. I tried to stall, but she's been getting more insistent. I heard footsteps returning. We'll figure this out, I promised quickly. Just follow my lead. Alicia swept back into the room holding a thick folder of documents. Here we are. Everything you need to know about the opportunity of a lifetime. She placed the folder before me, opening it to reveal dozens of pages of professional-looking documents, complete with colorful graphs showing projected returns. I pretended to skim them with interest. This looks comprehensive, I commented. Mind if I take these home to review more thoroughly? Her smile faltered. The opportunity closes Monday, Damian. We really need to lock this in tonight. The papers are quite straightforward. I never sign financial documents without reading them completely, I said firmly. It's a rule I've lived by all my business life. Surely you understand that, being in finance yourself. A flash of irritation crossed her face before she recovered her composure. Of course. But perhaps you could at least sign the intent to invest form tonight, just to hold your place? No money changes hands until the full agreement is signed. She flipped to a seemingly simple one-page document buried within the stack. I glanced at Paul, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. I think I'll take the whole package home, I said, closing the folder. Financial decisions shouldn't be rushed, especially significant ones like this. Alicia's demeanor shifted subtly, her warmth cooling. I'm afraid that won't be possible. These documents don't leave our possession until signed. Company policy. Then I suppose I'll have to pass on the opportunity. That would be a terrible mistake, she said, her voice hardening. This kind of chance doesn't come along twice. I'm willing to take that risk. The pleasant mask slipped further. Paul and I have committed significant resources to secure your place in this investment. Isn't that right, Paul? Paul nodded mutely, eyes downcast. It would be a shame to waste that effort, she continued, an edge entering her voice, especially when we've gone to such lengths to include you. I met her gaze steadily. I appreciate the thought, Alicia. Or should I say, Stephanie? The room went utterly still. Alicia's face froze, her smile vanishing like it had been wiped away. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of a wall clock. What did you just call me? She finally asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Stephanie. Stephanie Morgan. That is your real name, isn't it? I kept my tone calm, matter of fact. She laughed, but the sound contained no humor. I don't know what you're talking about. Paul, your father seems confused. Paul looked between us, uncertainty and fear warring in his expression. I'm not confused, I continued. In fact, I'm seeing things clearly for the first time. You're not Alicia Thompson from Chicago. You've never worked for Meridian Financial. You grew up in Rochester, not Boston or Philadelphia. And this isn't your first marriage, not even close. Her eyes narrowed to slits. These are ridiculous accusations. Paul, are you going to let your father talk to me this way? Paul remained silent, staring at the table. I pressed on. You've done this before, haven't you? Married men with money or connections to money, isolated them from family and friends, taken control of their finances, and then vanished once you'd drained them dry. This is absurd, she hissed, turning to Paul. Are you listening to this nonsense? Your father is clearly having some kind of episode. Maybe we should call someone. Show her, Dad, Paul said quietly, finding his voice at last. I pulled out my phone and opened the email from Frank, turning the screen toward her. Robert Greene of Chicago, your husband from 3 years ago. Before you emptied his accounts and disappeared, that is. The color drained from her face as she saw the photo of herself with a different man, her hair blonde, but her features unmistakable. That could be anyone, she stammered, but the confidence was gone from her voice. And this? I swiped to another photo. Catherine Lewis, Boston, 2018. Another of your aliases, according to court records. Charged with identity theft and fraud, but you skipped town before the trial. Paul stared at the images, the truth visibly crashing down on him. Alicia? What is this? Tell me it's not true. She turned on him, her demeanor shifting completely. Gone was the charming, attentive wife, replaced by something cold and calculating. Your father is trying to manipulate you, Paul. He's always been jealous of our relationship. He wants to control you, control your life. That's not true, Paul said, his voice stronger now. He's showing me evidence, photos, court documents. What about our money, Alicia? Where did our savings go? I told you, I invested it. For our future. But her eyes darted toward the door, an almost imperceptible movement that spoke volumes. Show me the investment records, Paul demanded. Right now. There, at the office. I can get them Monday. There are no records, are there? I said softly. No investments. Just transfers to accounts only you can access. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I don't have to listen to these insane accusations. You've always resented me, Damian. You couldn't stand that Paul found someone who made him happy, who helped him break free from your control. Is that what you call this? Paul gestured at himself. Breaking free? I haven't slept through the night in months. I've lost 20 pounds. I'm afraid to check my own bank accounts because of what I might find, or rather, what I won't find. Her strategy shifted again, tears suddenly filling her eyes. Baby, you know how hard I've worked for us, for our future. These investments take time to mature. I told you that. Stop lying, Paul said, rising to his feet. It's over. I want the truth. Where is our money? The tearful facade vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Her expression hardened into something ugly. Your father has poisoned you against me. After everything I've done for you. What you've done is steal from him, I said. And you were planning to steal from me too, with this fake investment scheme. You can't prove anything, she snapped, the pretense fully abandoned now. Actually, we can, I replied calmly. My lawyer has compiled quite a file on you, Stephanie. Or do you prefer Catherine? Maybe Jennifer? You've had so many names. It's hard to keep track. Her eyes widened slightly. Lawyer? What lawyer? Frank Walker. He specializes in fraud cases like yours. He's been tracking your activities across several states. The authorities in Chicago and Boston will be very interested in his findings. Paul stepped closer to me, physically aligning himself with me and away from her. I want you out of our house. Tonight. She laughed, a harsh sound. Our house? This is my house too, Paul. My name is on the lease. And as your wife, I'm entitled to half of everything we own. That's the law. Not when fraud is involved, I countered. And certainly not when the marriage itself was entered into under false pretenses. Her gaze turned calculating again. It would be your word against mine, and a messy public legal battle would be unfortunate for everyone. Think about it, Paul. Your career, your reputation. Do you really want everyone knowing you were too stupid to realize who you married? The manipulative cruelty of the statement hung in the air. I felt Paul flinch beside me, but he stood his ground. I don't care who knows, he said finally. I just want the truth, and I want whatever's left of my money back. She smirked. Good luck with that. Most of it isn't even in this country anymore. The casual admission confirmed everything. Paul stared at her, seeing the true face of his wife for the first time. You never loved me, did you? It was all an act from the beginning. Love? She rolled her eyes. Please, this was business. And frankly, you were an easy mark. So desperate for someone to pay attention to you, so eager to please. Men like you are always the easiest. I placed a restraining hand on Paul's arm, feeling him tense with anger. This conversation is being recorded, I said quietly. Has been since I arrived. Everything you've just admitted is on tape. Her eyes flew to my jacket pocket, where my phone was partially visible. You can't record someone without their consent. That's illegal. Not in this state, actually. Single-party consent is all that's required. And I certainly consented to recording your confession. Panic flashed across her face, quickly replaced by calculation. Fine, you want me gone? I'll go. Just give me an hour to pack some things. So you can clean out whatever's left? I don't think so, Paul said. You can take your personal items only, and we'll be watching. Her expression turned ugly. You think you've won? This isn't over. Not by a long shot. Actually it is, I said, pulling out my phone and sending a single-word text to Lloyd. Now, what did you just do? She demanded, watching me closely. Called for backup, I replied. The police should be here shortly to take your statement regarding the financial fraud you've just admitted to. Police? For the first time, real fear crossed her face. You're bluffing. Am I? Check the window if you don't believe me. She moved to the front window, pulling back the curtain. Sure enough, red and blue lights were already visible in the distance, approaching the house. You son of a bitch, she spat, turning back to me. You planned this whole thing. I planned to protect my son, I corrected, something any father would do. She lunged suddenly toward her purse on the counter, but Paul was faster, snatching it away. Looking for this? He opened the bag, finding her wallet bulging with cash. Were you planning a quick exit already? That's my personal money, she snapped. Paul rifled through the wallet, pulling out multiple ID cards. Jessica Wilson? Amanda Clark? How many identities do you have, Alicia? Or whatever your name really is. The sound of car doors slamming outside signaled the arrival of the police. Alicia's eyes darted around the room like a cornered animal's. This isn't over, she hissed. You have no idea who you're dealing with. On the contrary, I replied calmly. I think we finally do. The knock on the door was firm, authoritative. Police, open up, please. As Paul moved to answer it, I watched the woman who had nearly destroyed my son's life. Her mask had completely fallen away, revealing the cold, calculating predator beneath. She glared at me with undisguised hatred, but I saw something else in her eyes too. Fear. The game was up, and she knew it. The officers entered, and Lloyd followed close behind. As they began taking statements, I put an arm around Paul's shoulders. He was shaking, the full impact of the betrayal finally hitting him. I'm so sorry, Dad, he whispered. I should have seen it, should have known. She's a professional con artist, son. Seeing through people like her is what they pay FBI agents for. Don't blame yourself. As the police led Alicia, or Stephanie, or whatever her real name was, out in handcuffs, she turned back one last time. This won't stick, she called, it never does. But looking at her now, stripped of her charming facade, I wasn't so sure. This time, she had left too many tracks, too much evidence. And unlike her previous victims, we had caught her in the act, before she could disappear with everything. For the first time in months, I saw a glimmer of the old Paul returning as we watched the police car drive away. The road to recovery would be long, but at least now it could begin. The weeks following that fateful dinner were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, financial investigations, and emotional reckonings. The woman we had known as Alicia Thompson was held without bail due to flight risk, her true identity confirmed as Stephanie Morgan through fingerprint records from previous arrests. Paul's first step was changing all his passwords and freezing what accounts remained. The damage assessment was painful. Our joint savings of $70,000 completely emptied. His retirement account, loaned against to the maximum amount allowed, nearly $45,000 gone. The $50,000 wedding gift I had given them transferred overseas through a complex web of accounts. Credit cards maxed out, new lines of credit opened in his name. In total, Paul had lost over $120,000 in the 4 months since their wedding. A devastating amount, but as Frank pointed out, it could have been much worse had we not intervened when we did. Based on her pattern with previous victims, she was just getting started, Frank explained during a meeting at his office. The fake investment scheme targeting your assets would have been her largest score yet. We learned that Stephanie had a network of accomplices, including a man who created falsified employment records and another who posed as a financial advisor to help convince victims of her legitimacy. The FBI had been tracking parts of this network but hadn't connected Stephanie to it until our case brought new evidence to light. Most shocking was the discovery that Paul wasn't even her only current mark. She had another man in Portland she was grooming, visiting him on days she told Paul she was working late. A parallel con, running simultaneously. The divorce proceedings moved quickly under the circumstances, with the marriage annulled on grounds of fraud. The criminal case against Stephanie was overwhelming, with evidence from our situation combined with testimony from previous victims who came forward once news of her arrest spread. Paul moved in with me temporarily while sorting out his financial and emotional wreckage. Those first nights, I would hear him pacing at 3 a.m, unable to sleep. Sometimes I would find him sitting in the kitchen, staring into a cup of cold tea, lost in thought. "I keep replaying every moment with her," he confessed one such night when I joined him, "trying to see where I missed the signs. There were so many, Dad. So many moments where something felt off, but I ignored my instincts because I wanted to believe she loved me." "That's how these predators work," I said gently. "They're experts at making you doubt yourself, at exploiting your desire for connection and love." "I feel so stupid." His voice cracked, so ashamed. "You have nothing to be ashamed of. She's done this to multiple, intelligent, successful men. Her previous husband was a Harvard-educated investment banker with 20 years' experience. If he couldn't spot her game, how could you?" This seemed to offer some comfort, but the road to healing Paul's confidence was long. He started seeing a therapist who specialized in victims of emotional and financial abuse. Slowly, I began to see glimpses of my son returning. The first genuine laugh, a month after Stephanie's arrest, was like music. Financially, I helped him get back on his feet. It wasn't about the money, but about removing the additional stress so he could focus on healing. We set up a repayment plan that preserved his dignity while acknowledging the reality of his situation. "I'll pay back every penny," he insisted. "I know you will," I assured him, though I would have happily written it off as the cost of getting my son back. 6 months after Stephanie's arrest, Paul was ready to move into his own apartment, a modest place, nothing like the home he had shared with her, but his own fresh start. He had thrown himself back into his work, earning a promotion in the process. "Turns out, focusing on work instead of a fraudulent marriage does wonders for your career," he joked as we moved the last box into his new place. The criminal case against Stephanie concluded with a guilty verdict on multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation. Her sentence of 12 years brought a sense of justice, but the greatest victory was in reclaiming our lives from her influence. Through victim advocacy groups, we connected with others who had fallen prey to similar schemes. Their stories echoed Paul's with eerie similarity. The whirlwind romance, the isolation from friends and family, the gradual takeover of finances, the manipulation and gaslighting when questions arose. A year after that fateful night, Paul called me with news that made my heart swell with pride and hope. "I met someone," he said, a cautious optimism in his voice I hadn't heard in a long time. "At that volunteer program I told you about. Her name is Jessica." "That's wonderful, son," I replied, meaning it but unable to completely suppress a flicker of concern. Paul chuckled, reading my mind. "Don't worry, Dad. I've done my homework this time. She's a third-grade teacher born and raised in Seattle. I've met her parents, her brother, even her high school best friend, all thoroughly verified." I wasn't worried. I lied. "Yes, you were," he countered good-naturedly. "And that's okay. I was worried too. Still am sometimes. But I can't let what happened stop me from trying again. I just have to be smarter about it." "When do I get to meet her?" I asked. "Soon. But this time we're taking things slow, really getting to know each other before making any big decisions." This, more than anything, told me my son was healing. He had learned from his experience without becoming permanently bitter or closed off. It would have been easy to shut down, to wall himself off from the possibility of love. Instead, he was moving forward with caution but also courage. As for me, I found purpose in my retirement that I never expected. I began volunteering with a nonprofit that educates seniors and other vulnerable populations about financial scams. Once a month, I share our story at community centers and retirement homes, helping others recognize the red flags we missed. Sometimes Paul joins me for these talks. Together, we turn our painful experience into a warning that might save others from similar heartbreak. It doesn't erase what happened, but it gives meaning to our suffering. If there's one lesson I've taken from this ordeal, it's the importance of trusting your instincts. That uneasy feeling I had about Alicia from the beginning wasn't just overprotective fatherly concern. It was my subconscious recognizing inconsistencies my conscious mind wanted to ignore. The other lesson is the enduring power of authentic love. Not the whirlwind, too good to be true romance that Stephanie manufactured, but the steady, sometimes difficult love between family members who truly care for each other. The love that made me push past my doubts to investigate. The love that gave Paul the strength to face a devastating truth rather than live in a comforting lie. Life rarely gives us perfect endings. Paul still has moments of doubt and self-recrimination. The financial wound will take years to fully heal. Trust doesn't come as easily to either of us as it once did. But standing on the balcony of Paul's new apartment, watching the sun set over the Seattle skyline, I feel something that had been missing during those dark months of Stephanie's deception: peace. Not the naive peace of someone who hasn't been tested, but the hard-won tranquility of those who have faced betrayal and emerged stronger on the other side. "We're going to be okay, aren't we, Dad?" Paul asks, echoing my thoughts as he so often does. "More than okay," I reply, putting my arm around his shoulders. "We already are." Sometimes the deepest wounds lead to the most profound healing. Sometimes losing what you thought you wanted opens the door to what you truly need. And sometimes, when the masks fall away and the truth stands revealed in all its painful clarity, you discover that the most valuable things in life were there all along, waiting patiently to be recognized. Have you ever had an instinct about someone that others dismissed? What made you trust or doubt that feeling? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Sharing could help someone who might be facing a similar situation right now. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most necessary growth.